Tiffany Cloud. Welcome to The Storm, and thank you for watching today on WYLN 35. We have three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. Voters seem to do their homework when it comes to the executive and legislative branches, but when it comes to judicial, unfortunately, not so much. I believe this needs to change, that we all need to learn more about candidates seeking a position on the bench. That's why during last year's election cycle, I did my best to interview many candidates for Pennsylvania's Supreme and Superior Courts. Many Republicans and many Democrats appeared on The Storm. This election cycle, we have seats up on several statewide courts across the Commonwealth, and I'll once again help you to get to know the candidates. Today on The Storm, I'm joined by Craig Stedman. He's the District Attorney of Lancaster County, and he's running this election cycle for Pennsylvania Superior Court. So stay tuned, it's coming up only on WYLN 35. Welcome back to The Storm. I'm so pleased to be joined today by Craig Stedman. He is the current district attorney in Lancaster County, and he is running for Pennsylvania's Superior Court judge. Thank you so much for coming on The Storm.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
Well, I'm happy to have you and have my Northeastern Pennsylvania viewing audience get to know you a bit better. I was saying in the opening of the show that we don't do enough to really get to know our judicial candidates, and I think it's important that we do.
It's important because whatever matters to you, whatever it is, and there's something that matters to you, it can be affected by the stroke of a pen by a judge. And particularly our appellate courts can have the power to wipe out whatever the legislature has done, whatever the executive has done, whatever your county court of common pleas, the people that you fight to elect and you elect. So it is critical, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to come up here and talk to you.
Well, thank you. We're going to really dive in, getting to know you first on a personal level. I'd love to have you share with us a bit about your background, your ties to Pennsylvania, where you grew up, where you went to school, law school, etc.
Sure. So I have roots across Pennsylvania. I was actually born in Elwood City, Pennsylvania, in Lawrence County, in western Pennsylvania, near the Ohio border. My family on both sides worked for U.S. Steel, farmers out there, and then I was actually raised for the most of my life in Bucks County in southeastern Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So that's really where I grew up, and then went to law school, Penn State, Dickinson in Carlisle, and really went to law school to become a prosecutor, and became a prosecutor in Lancaster right out of law school. I went to the University of Delaware prior to law school, and actually got through the University of Delaware on an Army ROTC scholarship. That's how I was able to afford college.
Okay, I did not know that about your service. Okay,
and
Thank you.
Was in the United States Army Reserves for a number of years afterwards, and just a tremendous experience. And honestly, one of the reasons I'm running is there are 15 people on the PA Superior Court. There's not one veteran, and I think that needs to change.
Well, again, I thank you for your service very much. Both your service in the military and your service to the community, and it's nice too. That's shocking, actually, that there aren't more veterans.
It really is, and
yeah.
and not only that, one of the other reasons. Look, I absolutely love my job. I told you I went to law school to become a prosecutor. I believe in defending, making sure victims have a strong voice in the courtroom. I hate crime, and I make that distinction of hating crime versus hating criminals, because most people deserve that. At some point, they're going to come back out in the community. There's a few most terrible cases, but I hate what it does to people, and want to make a difference. And I think that you see a lot of people. It's exactly why they join the military. They believe in something bigger than themselves. They want to make a difference in their community, and in this case, they want to make a difference. I made it in the county. I want to offer that up for the state. I'll be honest with you. I never thought running for a judge. I love what I'm doing, but I'm also seeing some of the decisions from the appellate courts that are making my job more difficult to protect law-abiding citizens in Pennsylvania.
Okay, and we're going to definitely dive into that. But before we get there, I just want to double back a little bit. So you said you wanted to be a prosecutor. What was it that made you just decide to follow a career in the law in the first place? Was there something that happened, or was there a person that was sort of a mentor, or do you know where that came from, or you just always knew?
Boy, I tell you what, I don't know whether I could cite any one thing with that. I was the kid on your baseball team that if the wrong call had been made, even though it went in your favor, I'd be saying, no, he was actually safe. So people didn't want me on the team, but absolutely. And I think I went through the Pennsylvania Bar Association review, and they gave me highly recommended, which is very humbling and a great honor. But one of the things they cite is my commitment to fairness, and I think that's really what we need in all our judicial system, particularly in our appellate courts, and that's really at the heart of what I do. And a lot of people think that all we do as prosecutors is lock people up. I tell people we're the first public defenders because we all have the same rights. Your right is my right, and I need to make sure I'm defending the rights that are given in our Constitution for every single individual. By the same token, there's ways under the law to hold people accountable and responsible for their actions, because in our society we see more and more, I think, people are not accepting personal responsibility. Sometimes it has to be imposed on them, and that's where we can step in and really try to make a difference.
One of the things that's interesting is that a lot of people who run for Superior Court or for appellate courts, they've been a judge before. You are someone who is stepping in as a current district attorney who has not been a judge. Tell me what you think are maybe the advantages or disadvantages of that.
Well, being a judge is about making decisions. That's really what it is. And I've been a DA for the last 10 years, and every single day I'm making decisions actually with a lot less time and a lot less opportunity to sit back and read the briefs of both sides. I'm making a decision to charge somebody with homicide or file the death penalty against them, or charge somebody with rape of a child. These are things of great consequence, and my decisions are actually done in the arena of public scrutiny, because the media is going to cover every single thing I do. In fact, the media is asking me for decisions before I even have all the facts sometimes. So that's the crucible that I've worked in, is making decisions. And of course, the military training prepared me for making decisions in times of great stress. And I owe a lot of my success in my career to my training with the United States Army and preparing me for making decisions. The other thing I did is I really spent 20 years as a trial lawyer, and an appellate court is really a judge of, for the most part, what took place in trials. In fact, one of the reasons I'm running, and I didn't even know this till about a year ago, is 7 out of 10 of the cases on the Superior Court are criminal. So most of it's criminal. There's 1 is civil, 1 out of 10, 1 out of 10 is family, and then you've got the rest. Well, there's not one DA out of those 15 spots. So we've got the majority of those cases are criminal, and yet the backgrounds for everybody, and they're all talented, they're all intelligent, they're highly educated, qualified, but they don't have the background. They don't see the real world impact of those decisions that are made typed up on a computer. And what does that mean to a victim on the street? What does that mean to a police officer who he or she is risking his or her life every single day out there? And that doesn't mean that every decision I make is pro-police, so to speak, or it's got to be fair. But you have to have people on those appellate courts to understand the real world. Have that criminal
experience. Yep. Okay. And with that, we're going to have to go to our first break, and we will be right back on The Storm. Welcome back to The Storm. I'm joined today by Craig Stedman. He is the current district attorney in Lancaster County, and he is running for Pennsylvania Superior Court judge. In the last segment, you talked about the fact that about 70% of the cases that go before the Pennsylvania Superior Court are criminal cases, and why it's so important for someone with courtroom experience who's been a prosecutor to be on the bench. I understand that. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the sorts of cases that you're coming across in Lancaster County. I know that, for example, up here in Luzerne County, we're having a lot more cases as related to opioids and drugs, et cetera. What's going on down in Lancaster County?
Unfortunately, it's the same thing across all of Pennsylvania. And the opioid crisis, particularly heroin crisis, which is leading to other drugs even more powerful, is taking more lives than traditional homicides and car accidents combined. And just to give you some perspective on that, In Pennsylvania in 1979, 134 people died from overdoses. That's the report that we have. I mean, obviously it might be off a little bit, but you're talking about 100. And then now what we're looking at is about 4,500 people. And that's not even counting all the people that we're saving with Narcan. And I don't know how much that's used up here. I think it's pretty widespread, but we are literally bringing people back from the dead with that. Our EMT calls, the tax on the medical resources is enormous. Just a couple years ago, 5% of our calls were for overdoses. The last number we had that I know of was 8%, but I'm sure it's going to be even higher this year. So basically what that translates to is 1 out of 10 times we see an ambulance going by in Lancaster County, they're going to an overdose. 1 out of 10 times. And when they're doing that, and they have the obligation to save that person's life, but when they're doing that, that means the response times for somebody who was in a car accident or your loved one had a heart attack or something like that are going to be delayed. And it is just financially taxing on the medical responders, but it's also emotionally taxing on them, because I know I've talked to them a lot, our EMTs, and they say they're frustrated that they save the same person sometimes 3-4 times a week, sometimes 3 times a day. They're going back to the same person, they save them, and there's not much we can do. So that crisis have really been at the
and it's probably flooded. You have a lot more cases just flooding into the courtrooms. Yeah,
tons of cases, and
on top of just all of the other stuff.
Top of all of them. So really, I've worked with the DA's Association and try to make partnerships, because partnerships is the key to combating this. It's not going to come from, we're not going to wrest our way out of the problem. Having said that, there's a role for enforcement, and drug dealers that are selling these poisons to our kids and to our loved ones. And it's everybody. It's all walks of life. It's all cultures. It's all ages. It's all genders.
Yes.
Those predator drug dealers need to go to jail, and they need to go to jail for a long time. That's another reason I mentioned about making my job harder. The appellate courts threw out the mandatory minimum sentences we had for the big drug dealers. So they're getting about half the time that they were getting before. They're businessmen. You cut down the price of doing business, it's actually, there's more of them there. So this is something that I've worked on from the enforcement aspect. We also hired last year our first ever outreach coordinator. The best statistic in crime is the one that didn't take place because we got to somebody early on. So looking at sort of a different way of a prosecutor. Traditionally, we wait till the crime took place and then we arrest and we held them accountable. We're good at that, and I'll continue to do that because it's very, very important. But if we can reach people at a younger age and steer them away, combined with education, and prevention, that's ultimately the solution. We have to work with our medical providers as well.
When your DA's office is getting flooded with so many more of these cases, and I know that there's a lot of violent crime that's unfortunately up because of drugs, etc. The economy's tough, that sometimes leads to crime. When you're being flooded, what sort of things have you done in the DA's office to improve efficiencies that you might also take and apply to improving efficiencies on the extremely busy Pennsylvania Superior Court?
I guess an excellent question, and I think I'll start the answer by going back to the military.
Okay.
And the training there is, it's easy for people to get into your lives and just see a problem and say, oh, I'm going to blame this person, or I'm going to complain about this. Well, I've been starting to complain about the decisions from the appellate courts. I can either complain about it or I can do something about it and try to get involved and take a step into that arena. The same token, that's the way I try to run my office. I don't really care why we have a problem in this particular area. I know, if somebody needs to be held accountable, we'll hold them accountable. But really what I'm interested in is solutions. And solutions, you have to partner. And what we've done actually over the last couple of years with our courts to improve efficiency was really sit down with the last couple of president judges. We've come up with some things that have essentially led for, it used to be a few years ago, 28% of our cases were a year or more older. That means people sitting out of prison. That means cost as taxpayer. That means victims are waiting for a result. Witnesses are on hold. Now we're down to about 6%.
Oh, wow.
And that's because we work together. I can't do it alone. There has to be the commitment and recognition that we're doing it with the defense bar, we're in it with the police, we're in it with the victims, the witnesses, and the judges. And that's the same kind of attitude I think we need to take to the appellate courts, because I think you had mentioned that Superior Court is, if not the most busiest court in the appellate court in the country. I think it's definitely one of the top.
Yes, I'd heard the Pennsylvania Superior Court was the busiest appellate court in the country. It's definitely up there. So yes, efficiencies seem like they would be very, very important. That's why I asked the question. I want to ask you another question, and it's kind of a different direction, but Philadelphia. It seems like we have so many judges coming out of Philadelphia. And if you're from Philadelphia, you just have this baked-in advantage because of of the locale. But it seems like so many of these other counties and areas within the Commonwealth just are not getting the representation on many of our high courts that they should be getting, or that we'd like to see happening.
You're spot on. And traditionally, the Democrats have run one Philadelphia judge after another with few Pittsburgh judges. And essentially, their ticket would be judges from Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. That would essentially be what it is. And there's a lot more to Pennsylvania. I have nothing against Philadelphia and Pittsburgh.
Right.
I grew up near Philadelphia. I was born near Pittsburgh.
Hey, I'm an Eagles fan. I got nothing against either. But
and I think they, obviously there should be those representative, but there's a lot more to Pennsylvania than Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Lancaster County is the 6th biggest county in Pennsylvania. Not only do we have no one on all 31 appellate court spots, not one person from Lancaster County, nobody can think in Lancaster County, I've talked to people who are in their 70s, judges in their 70s who've retired now, no one can think of the last time anyone from Lancaster County was on any one of the appellate courts.
Wow.
That's just wrong. And it's not just about Lancaster. I mean, there should be representation throughout the state. And
to your point, though, 6th biggest county in the Commonwealth and no representation at all.
Not just Superior Court, on any of them.
Yeah, on any. It's mind-blowing.
I mean, I know the one judge, so we'd have to probably go back to the 1920s if someone was on there. So you're looking at 100 years or more since someone from Lancaster was on there, and I think it's that's one factor, I think, among many.
Okay, well, and with that, we're going to have to take our second break. We will be right back on The Storm. Welcome back to The Storm. So I want to ask you about what the role of a judge is to you. Let's start with that.
I think that's such a pertinent question, particularly these days. You've seen some of the decisions from the Ninth Circuit. You saw what they did with Gorsuch and the hearings, and how, in my opinion, you've seen politicization of the whole judicial process. And the role of a judge is pretty simple. It's to follow the law. It should not be based on outcome driven. And I've seen the Democrats have run people who that they wanted to basically legislate from the bench. And there's a different philosophy from the Republican Party and me individually that's not what they're there for. I make decisions as DA all the time that I'm not necessarily happy with, but that's what the law is. If I want to run to change the laws, then run for legislator. Don't run for DA. Don't run for judge. The Constitution is the bedrock of these decisions, and there's ways to change the Constitution. Even if you want to change the Constitution, it's not through judges, and that's been frustrating for me as a prosecutor, as a Republican, and just as a citizen. So I think it's important that we make sure we elect candidates who understand the limited role of the judiciary. I mean, the founding fathers didn't intend for the judges to be legislating. And they're, I would say, by design, are to be conservative. In other words, they're to follow the law. Only, when they're violating the Constitution, extreme cases, should the judges be sort of making the law. And all too often, we're seeing that. And as a DA, I see it all the time. It's like now we have to change everything we've done and go back and do it because the whole aspect of a certain aspect of a law has changed. And that's one of the impacts that I see.
Okay. I'd like you to just tell us, I know you've told us a bit about yourself, certainly, and about your experience, but how would you kind of summarize your candidacy?
Look, I mean, my candidacy comes down really, I think, to 3 words. It comes down to commitment, safety, and freedom. It's to making the commitment to use the laws to protect my safety, your family's safety, my kids' safety, and their freedoms. Because that really is what the foundation of our country is about, is giving them security and opportunity. And you need public safety for that. We need representatives on the appellate courts that understand how important that is. I mean, you think about it. There is no more important issue than public safety. You could talk about taxes, you could talk about roads, you could talk about schools, but if you don't feel safe in your community, in your home, and you don't think your kids are going to be safe going to school, what are you thinking about other than that in your life?
Sure.
That's the foundation. And you know, for me, it's about that commitment. I've made that commitment to public service throughout my entire life, starting in college when I joined Army ROTC, carrying into the Reserve Service, and then carrying into the prosecutor's office. And this is sort of a natural extension for me to continue that service on a statewide level and bring that commitment to the state, and making sure that our freedoms are still there. You know, people talk about it, but justice, equal justice, fairness, and freedom, they're not just words. They have great meaning, and we need people to understand that.
Absolutely. You talked about, I smiled earlier because you said that you don't like to complain about things, you like to do something about things, which is actually how I sign off my show, which I love. So, you know, I love that. But tell me a little bit more about the kind of values that matter to you.
Look, I think we've seen a change. There's a battle going on for the soul of the country. I see values that are under attack, you know, that made the country strong, about personal responsibility, accountability, and just the value of hard work. I mean, those things seem to be forgotten by a number of people. One of the things that really is personal for me and what I've seen as DA is the demonization of the police that we've seen in the national media and certain individuals and organizations. And those are not just words. They're having life and death consequences to police officers. These officers, they don't know what they're going to get on every traffic stop. And I'm not saying every police officer is right 100% of the time.
Sure.
And if they commit a crime, believe me, I prosecute police officers. I'll do it to the fullest extent of the law. Nobody's more offended by a police officer who's gone over the line than people in law enforcement. But we also have to really recognize that they don't ask anything about what they're responding to. You know, I had a case last summer in which officers were being shot at, actually targeted. And I can tell you, officers from throughout the entire county, they ran to that scene. They drove to that scene. They could have turned around, and they went, and they're putting their lives on the line, and need people to understand that.
Well, I thank you so much for coming on the show. You are welcome back anytime. People can check you out at stedmanforjudge.com. And remember, folks, when you look around and don't like what you see, don't complain about it. You can do something about it. And I thank you for watching.